Welcome, everyone, to another episode of season 4 of the Runners Roundtable, where each season we are talking to inspiring women in the running space, or in this case, in the sports space, and talking to women who are changing how we understand running and sports, and really how we can all be empowered to change the stories that we tell about women in sport. So I'm really focusing on the sport part of it, even though we will get into the running bit of it, but I do want to focus on sport today because not only was yesterday girls and women in sports day. So if y'all are listening to this and you kind of want to know when this episode was recorded, you'll have that as a touch point. But also because I am speaking to Jamie Mittelman today, how would I describe you other than someone who's on a very similar mission as myself, where we recognize the importance of stories and of amplifying the voices of women, particularly women in sport. And again, giving the context of yesterday, the girl and women in sports day, I that day is always such a beautiful day to highlight women and girls in sport, but it's also a very sobering day when you start seeing what the statistics are for girls in sport and when they get out of sport, and even for women and how we get into sports or retain participation in sports. So before we kind of get into everything that you do and how you're doing it, can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit of your running specific story?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you to chat today, Stephanie. Really excited to be a part of your community. I'm Jamie Mittelman, the founder of Flame Bears, which is the world's first storytelling platform that elevates the voices specifically of women Olympians and Paralympians from around the world. So we are, as you mentioned, sport agnostic. We work with women in all different sports in the Olympics and Paralympics, summer and winter, and we tell their stories in their words on their terms. Um, in terms of why we do this, I think we're probably preaching to the choir here, but historically 95% of sports media has gone to men. I think the idea of it even being called sports media is a misnomer. It should be called male sports media, if we're being honest. We're now up to 15% coverage for women athletes, but of that 15%, there's a very narrow slice of people who are being represented. And then of those, a lot of their stories are co-opted or are not being told the way they are. In terms of my background running, I actually just last year completed my second marathon. I did the Boston Marathon in high school. I was a track and field athlete. I could have run a college track, but I realized I probably wanted to stick to soccer, which was my main sport. But running has always played an important role for me because it's been a place of joy for me. I grew up in a small town of 5,000 people, predominantly in the woods, and I would go trail running. Growing up with my mom or my dad or my siblings, and we'd take our dog out, and that was how we got our exercise on weekends if we weren't competing in a soccer match or doing another sport. So for me, running is a place of connection, and it's a place of grounding, and it's a place of community.
Yeah, I that's been my for the past year and a half. Reconnecting to my joy as a runner has been something that is so incredibly prominent for me. And even yesterday, as I was reflecting on this Girls and Women in Sports Day, reflecting on my journey as a runner and as an athlete, and thinking about my daughters. I have two daughters, and they've grown up knowing me as a runner. I don't think they remember me as being anything other than a
Mm,
person who runs. But as I was reflecting on that, I realized that growing up, I never saw people in my family exercising for fun. or exercising as a way of family time. Like I think about it here in my household, I'm like, that's something we do. And we're like, what are we going to do? I don't know. Let's just take the dog out and go for a really long walk. Like that's something we do
Mhm.
for fun. And I didn't realize that, or it didn't really sink in until yesterday. And obviously, I've had conversations with other people on the podcast where we talk about the privilege of being able to run and the privilege of being able to exercise, the privilege of having the time to do so. And I know this is something that I heard you in another interview talk about, the privilege we have here to go out in our female bodies and exercise, and how that's a privilege that women in other places don't have. So, can you speak to that privilege a little bit more?
100%. And it's, I think exactly that that takeaway that you shared in terms of not growing up with that. My mom mentioned to me that she didn't even the idea of exercising wasn't something that she grew up with. She only started it when she was in college, and it was because she saw people around her running, and she was like, "Oh, what is this? I want to understand this." So definitely something that is a privilege. Um, I worked with Masuma Alizada. She is a cyclist from Afghanistan. Had the opportunity to tell her story last season. I also worked with her teammate, another Afghan cyclist, to elevate her voice. And both of them told me the story of growing up bike riding in Afghanistan, having to dress up as men in order to get on their bikes, not being able to go on their bicycles alone, having to be guarded literally by men while they are bike riding. And then when people in cars drive by and they realize, oh, these people who look like men are not actually men, they would hurl things at them, they would hit them, they would actually insult them. So, just the idea of being able to be an athlete while being a woman is not something that I ever really considered, growing up with athletics being a part of my life. I never questioned it and saw it as something that was truly not given to everyone. But hearing their stories made me do a serious double take.
Yeah, I mean, my I have my youngest daughter, she does volleyball and she made the club team. So
Congrats.
we're all in. We're all into this volleyball. And again, with her, I'm thinking, holy smokes, when I was growing up, we were so poor, I couldn't do sports. Like not only did I not see it in my family, but we just could not afford it. And
Yep.
we had, think it might have been last week where we were at the dinner table. I'm trying to explain to my family how it's a privilege to be able to go to the gym, to have a gym
Totally.
membership, to my daughter who's playing volleyball. Like I'm like,
Not
to
have to have a
understand
job to be able to have the time to be able to do that and not be like, I have to be working.
exactly. So I'm trying to explain this to them, and they're just like, what? To them, they don't even realize it. And I think that's something that I don't know if it's part of the fact that women aren't covered as much in media
Hmm.
or what, but I think here, maybe in the States or just in certain communities, we're not able to or willing to, or just the blinders are on to see that that is a privilege, not like a privilege of time, a privilege of finances, a privilege of having parents who care and are invested in that. So how do you, I guess, how do we start to change people's awareness?
Yeah. That's such a good question, and it's something that if I'm being honest, I'm actively working on too. I try to every time that I'm working out, be really grateful, actually. So I think it starts with myself and ourselves as individuals. So every time that I work out, I try to acknowledge my privilege. So first off, be like, how lucky am I that I have the ability to go for a run? How cool is this? Even if it is, 5 a.m., it's freezing out and I'm grumpy, I try to be like, you know what? No, I have I have 2 legs, I'm not working right now, and I have the opportunity to do this. This is amazing. And so I think that's the first one, is in terms of just like a internal gratitude. I then
Mhm.
also have been trying to share that with people who I'm running with. So if I'm in community with other people, making a little comment being like, "Hey, I feel so lucky that we can do this." So actually kind of trying to spread that gratitude. Um, and then also challenging the assumptions anytime that I do notice blinders on in myself or others, trying to just gently check that. I've noticed that when I am called out for blind spots in kind of an aggressive way, I get defensive. So I like to, if I see someone taking it for granted, like I used to do many times, I would just gently be like, hey, it's pretty cool that we can afford to do this, that we have the time to do this. And I found that a lot of people generally then pause and are like, wow, you're right.
Yeah, and that's such a the story of being a human, right? Is giving ourselves time to reflect and not take things personally when when
Right.
we are called out or called in or whatever it is. I think it's really challenging. And I think what you're saying is something that I definitely preach very often as to those of us who are in the running community or in the sports space, it is on us to create an environment that is welcoming for others, right? Like it is on us
Totally.
to acknowledge that, yeah, this is a privilege because there's also a lot of people who I find, and I'm sure you've had this experience where people reach out and they'll be like, I don't know how you do it. And it's like, it's not just motivation. I'm going to be honest. I have structures in place that allow me to do these things. I have neighborhoods where I feel safe to do
Yeah,
these things. I have a partner that can watch my children while I do these things. And I think that's something that oftentimes gets missed when all you see,
totally.
that picture or that reel or whatever the case is. And I think that's part of why the storytelling aspect of things is something that's so fascinating to me because you do get to see beyond the highlight reel to see that this is a real person with real struggles. And in spite of those struggles, they're still chasing their goals. So I'm curious for you, what has been your biggest learning in the time that you've been doing flame bearers?
Oh boy, I have a lot of learnings. I have a lot of really good learnings. A couple things. So I'll give you a personal one and a professional one. Let's start with the professional one first. This has been one of the takeaways or one of the consistent threads I've seen working with all the athletes. So now I've worked with over 100 Olympians and Paralympians from around the world, which is just crazy to me. And one of the lessons that I have learned from them is the idea of not seeing a no or a loss or a failure as first of all a personal attack or a shortcoming of my own, but rather viewing it as an opportunity for learning.
Hmm.
So the idea of, okay, I missed the podium, I came in fourth place, I didn't PR in this race, I tripped, I fell. Not instead of beating yourself up, instead of, which is honestly, that's my default. I go to a place of, how Jamie, how could you do this? These are all the ways you fell short. And instead of being so self-critical, taking a good hard look in the mirror and saying, what could I do differently next time? So I think the first one that I like to call out is the idea of viewing setbacks as learning opportunities and really taking that to heart either professionally or personally. Um, the second one is a bit more personal, and it's the idea that, and I instinctively knew this, but I think to have the privilege to work with these women from around the world is how similar we are. Is really the idea that, these are women who play different sports, are from different backgrounds, they speak different languages, races, religions, sexualities, but the idea that we're all very, very similar. We all have the same wants, desires, goals as individuals. Yes, it may be in different sports, but everyone is craving connection, is craving love, is craving significance. And I think it's been really a privilege and an honor to be able to bear witness to seeing the similarities across space and time.
Oh, I just love that, craving significance. And I wrote that down because well, first of all, I want to say to everyone that's listening, like, it's okay to have your pity party. I love pity parties, like
Me
after
too.
something doesn't go to plan. Like, I love those pity parties. They feel really good. Like that disappointment or anger or whatever, like it needs to go somewhere and preferably
Totally.
out of you. So like have your pity party. But what I always say is have a pity party, just don't stay. Right? Like have your pity party, but don't stay. And I think it's also like a greater statement to how we view our participation in whatever sport we do, right? I
Yeah.
often, whenever I have my pity party, I'll have my pity party and I'll be like, "Blah." But then I'll remind myself, this event is not going to stop me
Yeah.
doing the thing. So if I'm not going to stop, and in my case, it's running, right? I have a race, and people who have listened to this, if you've listened to the Marine Corps marathon recap, it was not the race that I hoped I would have. It was not the race that I had trained for, planned for, prepared for. There's no way I could have prepared for what happened to me during that race. And when I finished, yes, there was disappointment, but I was also quickly able to shift the story of, okay, that didn't go how I wanted it to go,
Mhm.
but that experience is not going to stop me from running. So if it's not going to stop me from running, what can I learn from this? Like, what can I
Mhm.
learn about myself that is not connected to a finish time? What can I learn about myself that is not connected specifically to performance? And I think those are the things that as athletes, personally feel that we all need to do better about.
Yeah.
So whether it's I'm proud of myself for having a consistent training block, or I'm proud of myself for, listen, this is me, y'all. This is realness. Half the time I'm proud of myself because I had lunch. Okay. Like on the days that I work out, and it's funny
Mhm.
because my daughters, when I pick them up from school, I'll tell them I had lunch today, and they're like, "Yay, mommy, you had
Yay!
lunch." And it's just that it's how can we celebrate the other things that help
Yep.
us get to the start line, that help us get to the finish line? And I feel like, again, in general, like we need to do more about talking about those things,
Yeah.
also celebrating those things, because it is in those bits and pieces that are the lessons, right? Like it's the lesson, because sometimes I'm thinking of, the example you just gave of I tripped. No one goes into their practice and they say, let's do tripping today to see how we
Perfect.
recover, right? Like there's things in it that are not controllable.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's where the benefit of these stories come, where you can see like, oh, this person who looks like they're perfect and they have it all figured out, they don't. So when you hear stories like that, how do you synthesize it in a way that you're like, ha, this is a learning for all of us that
Yeah.
we can get, not just this person? Because I feel that sometimes maybe we have that issue where we feel like we can't relate to the
Yeah.
people who are at that Olympic, Paralympic level.
Right. I think it's so hard because we literally do just see the highlight reel. You know, we see on Instagram the gold medal moment. We don't see them crying in the corner in that moment of pity party, which is very important and part of the healing process and part of what we need to go on. So I think part of it is also about willingness to let people in to those moments. You mentioned that your children celebrate when you have lunch. Deja Young, now Deja Young Craddock, she is a three-time Paralympic runner, parasprinter from the US. She told me her equivalent is making her bed, that she is like, I feel great about my day when I make my bed. Nothing else can happen, and I feel like my day is a success because I have made my bed. And I so to be honest, since then, every day I make my bed, and if I don't, I'm like, "Oh, Jamie, you're letting Deja down." So I think a part of it is is honestly being okay showing that vulnerability. And then on the flip side, if we're listening to someone share that vulnerability, holding space for it and not immediately like challenging that, but just be seeing that as part of a flawed normal human being that we all are. I think we need to rethink how we think of celebrities in general. Many of the world's best athletes are considered celebrities. They're put up on these platforms. They, many of them have told me that they feel like they have to be robotic, that they have to perform, that they have to be on. Simone Biles, brought this to life with her conversations around mental health. Why is it that I always have to be on when, you can take a sick day from work? I can't. So it's this idea of people rethinking how we think about athletes and them as, guess what, just humans like you and me.
It's so interesting because, and I just kind of want to pick at this Simone Biles thread for a minute,
Yeah,
because this was something that I observed that I found incredibly frustrating with the commentary, where I saw
crazy.
a lot of commentary afterwards of, this is why she trains for this. She should be mentally able to cope with the stress. And I'm like, what the, just what? What are you even thinking? Because listen, listen, Linda, listen, Paul, sorry if there's Linda and Paul that listens to this episode, but like when I see that, I'm like, where are you giving space for humanity in
Totally.
people? Like, where are you giving space for there being something in their story, in their life, in the context of who they are that we don't know? And who are we, normal, quote unquote, normal people, to judge when someone who, yes, they train for that, but guess what? All that training has made them incredibly in tune with their body, incredibly in tune
Exactly.
with their experience. So who are we to say this is what they trained for, and because they didn't do it, they're a quote unquote failure? So I'm curious if you heard any commentary like that and what your
Yeah.
response to that would be.
Um, yes, I've heard it. 2, it makes me livid. And 3, I think it's so backwards and ridiculous. Every time I hear those comments, I want to be like, okay, Paul, okay, Linda, you get out on the mat, you get out on the balance beam, go for it. If you know how to do this so much, have at it. Let's see how you do. I think what a lot of people miss is that in the case of Simone Biles, it's literally life threatening if she goes out there and she is not in a good mental state. It is not like me just missing a day of work where I miss an interview. No, no, no. She could literally fall and break her back and die. So I have no tolerance for those comments. I think that they, to be honest, are naive and detached and are just downright silly.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I remember again watching the discourse, seeing how everything unfolded. And for me, it was like she stepped back and then other women were allowed to shine. And I think that's
Exactly.
beautiful too. So, like, what's going on here? There's such a heavy pressure. Again, for me, it's that heavy pressure on performance without realizing
Yep.
there's more to being an athlete, right? It's not just what you're physically doing with your body, it's how are you mentally coping with the stress? How are you mentally feeling? Like emotionally, are you okay? Like for me, I'm always like, are you okay? Do you feel okay? Like,
Right.
that it?
And to your point, she's part of a larger team. This is not the Simone Biles show. Her ability to step back gave other athletes the ability to step forward. And her team ended up doing great because of it. If she had competed and she was unwell, we don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, so this is going to bring me back to kind of a different question.
Yeah.
Um, because you focus on stories of women, and that's what I do on my podcast too. I've only ever
I
spoken to
love.
women. I don't plan on, sorry men, y'all are awesome, but it's for me, it's very important to amplify the voices of women. And I find that the more I speak to women, the more I realize we've got it all wrong when it comes to making it seem like women compete against each other in catty ways. So,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that?
On the whole cattiness
Yeah.
conversation on yeah, that kind of falls under, I think, at the very beginning I mentioned the quantity problem. So the fact that we're now up to 15% of media, but also the quality problem of the co-opting of narratives, of the focusing on certain things. So I would put the cattiness problem as one of a long list of problems that fall under the quality bucket. This comes up when commentators or sports marketers talk about focus on the team dynamics and this person hating this person um, in ways that they never would with their male the male athletes they work with. I think it distracts from conversations that are actually important, that many of the women athletes actually care about. And I would encourage anyone who is in a position of power where you have the ability to reflect or talk about athletes to try to challenge what you focus on. And to, yes, just because it has historically been covered, to not fall into the trope of covering it, because I think it does significant damage as we're perpetuating the narrative of women being catty, which I don't necessarily buy. Yes, there have been catty women in the existence of our planet. That is true, as there have been catty men. Uh, but I think in general, I have noticed that my women teammates across sports in general are not that way. They're incredibly supportive. They want to uplift each other. We want to be in community with each other. So let's focus on the world we want to create, not the world we are trying to not live in anymore.
Yeah, and I think there's two things here where it's one, when those stories come out, it's kind of no surprise that some girls will not want to participate in sports because that's not the environment they want to be in. But also on the flip side of that, there's almost this, I don't want to say forgiveness of cattiness, but for a lack of better phrasing right now, when you're talking about media coverage of women in sport being so limited that it becomes this thing where you have to do something to get the spotlight on you. And sometimes some women may see that as, oh, I need to be catty. I mean, it's so silly, but I'm thinking of like Megan the Stallion and Nicki Minaj
And
and
Nicki
they've
Minaj.
got going on right now where it's like, yeah, they're fighting, and all of a sudden, all these eyes are on them right now. So it's
Totally.
kind of this thing of how do we create environments where women all feel like they can thrive without
Yeah.
attacking other women? And does increasing that resource of coverage, does that change the story at all?
I hope so. You know, it's interesting. At the end of the day, I get questions about people are like, should women sexualize themselves for media? Should women be catty for media? And I am my my official stance on this is we have enough critics that
Mhm.
I am not going to critique how individuals think is best for themselves to get the attention that they want. So there are many athletes who are, focus on uh reels and Instagram posts where you see lots of their body, and many women athletes get very upset about that. And I understand that. At the same time, I think we have enough critics that I'm going to say, you know what? If that's what that athlete thinks is best for her, okay. And I think we need to uplift all voices together because I think the pie is big enough for everyone.
Oh yeah.
That's the world that I am working towards.
Yeah, and listen, I'm in agreement with you where I'll see things and I'm like, all right, you do you, boo. Like this isn't, I'm not going to lose sleep over
Exactly.
how you're doing things, so you keep doing it. But it's also kind of, again, going back to this concept of story. It's We don't know what their story is. We don't know what bills they have to pay. We don't know who's sponsoring them, who's not sponsoring them. And especially with something like social media now, we have no clue what requirements are on them for social media metrics of like, okay, what reels, how many
Totally.
likes are you getting? What's your engagement? Like, we have no clue what contractual obligations people have when it comes to social media as well. So for me, I just see that stuff and I'm like, you know what? You do your thing.
Exactly. We also have no idea what their real relationship is like. I've had so many conversations with athletes who have been like, "We planned this whole thing to get eyeballs on us."
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, "No, we actually love each other. We're great friends, but we just wanted people to pay attention to us. So we created this little feud, this little argument." I'm not saying that's the case here. I have no idea what their situation is, but the point is that we don't know what's actually going on, and we have to be okay with that.
Yeah. And you know what? To the women who are creating those feuds, like more power to you because you're working a
It's
system that's
working.
not
Exactly.
designed to work for you. So, like, until things are better and until things are,
Work it.
yeah, you got to do what you got to do. All right. I want to shift gears a little bit because you had mentioned you ran your second marathon last
Yeah.
year. So,
Mhm.
what was your first marathon?
I ran the New York City Marathon, I guess it was 9 years ago, and then this past year, I thought I was done. I love half marathons. I feel like that is a distance that I can run that doesn't significantly impact, my lifestyle on a daily
Mhm.
basis. But then my younger sister wanted to run her first marathon, so we ran the entire Boston Marathon, side by side, which was really, really special.
How did you get into the Boston Marathon?
Okay, so we did charity spots, so we did not qualify. That would have been so much more time, and that is assuming that I would have even been able to do it, which I don't know I would have been able to. So we did charity spots.
Can you explain to people, because you mentioned lifestyle, right? And this
Yes.
is something that I try to get across to people all the time, particularly with a marathon like Boston, where there's a lot of poo-pooing on charity runners from
Yep.
a certain subset of the running community. Can
Sure.
you, in your experience, just share with us, how was it like training for a marathon and fundraising at the same time?
Incredibly challenging. And first and foremost, as a charity runner, who works with some of the best runners in the world, I definitely had some stuff on my shoulders, a chip on my shoulders about it. That said, I think it's an incredible opportunity to be able to do something that I otherwise wouldn't, and hundreds of other people wouldn't have the ability to do. So I am a huge proponent of the concept of charity spots, and my little inner voice about not qualifying, I just need to get over that. So that's kind of my 2 cents. In terms of balancing the running and the fundraising, um the fundraising was honestly harder than the actual running, if I'm gonna be honest, for me. So they have a pretty high bar. Boston is extremely competitive, even with charity spots, so they keep increasing the amount that you have to fundraise. What I did is I hosted dinners with friends to come over. Everyone could make donations, obviously writing letters for donations, but I like to do things where people feel like they're actually getting something in return. So I
Mhm.
tried to host events, gatherings, where people would come together and there was either some sort of speaker or a meal.
Thank you for saying that because it's really hard to fundraise,
It's
and as you
so
said,
hard.
the bar for Boston is even higher, and I kinda wanna pull it back to something we talked about earlier, right? Like, the privilege of having a network that could give you that, right? So it's you
Insane.
right? So I think that's something that I also like to point out to people where being a charity runner, there is a privilege in that as well
Massive.
because it means you do have a social network that
Totally.
is either large enough or has enough like depth to their pockets in order to support you. And that's always been my thing when I talk about charity runners, where I'm like, we need to do
Yeah,
more to elevate. And I've said this before in a different podcast with a different discussion of, I would love to see these big marathons or big events not only highlighting the runners who come in first or whatever stories they highlight,
yeah,
so highlighting those charity runners so that people can see this is a way you can do this particular race and
exactly.
you will be celebrated for it. So you did Boston as a charity runner, did the
Mhm.
run, and now I'm curious about that storytelling for yourself of not qualifying for Boston and how,
Yeah,
I guess, how has that evolved? I mean, if you did it last year, we're almost at the
sure.
year mark. How has that little bit of talk evolved for you?
Yeah, I when my sister approached me with the idea of running Boston, we knew that we were going to go for charity spots, and we knew that we were not going to try to qualify. So right away, that was our expectation. We were worried about the fundraising, and we were because it is such a big ask. And also, our circles are similar. If you're related to someone, you share a lot of the same asks. So we have to be strategic about who you actually ask. I think that because I knew that I was going to be doing this supporting a nonprofit, that I I was okay with the fact of really focusing on the experience. For me, this was an opportunity to have really incredible quality time with my sister. Again, what a privilege and what an honor to be able to do that. That's not something a lot of people have the ability to do. So I think, yes, in the back of my mind, I had this chip on my shoulder about, being one of the charity spots. At the same time, this for me was about a once in a lifetime bucket list opportunity that I wouldn't trade for anything, and I that's really the narrative that I have been focusing on. Um, so I view this as, I'm probably I think she's never gonna run a marathon again. It was a very positive experience, but again, the amount of time and effort and things that you have to forego is significant, let alone the financial drain on it. So I think that the narrative that I am feeling right now is just incredibly grateful that I had that time with my younger sister.
Yeah, you all picked a very challenging race to do together. So kudos to you. If my sister listens to this, maybe we'll run a marathon one day. I don't expect her to, but I think that's that's something that's been my own inner dialogue regarding a race like Boston has been one, I don't know if I want to work that hard to fundraise
Yeah.
because I know that I'm not going to qualify because I know that right now I
Mhm.
don't want to work that hard to get time. Like I've said this before, it's honestly it's become a a song for myself this year where
Mhm.
I'm like I already work hard to do everything that I do. I don't want to work harder. I don't want to work harder. I
Great.
want to work smarter. For me, it's very much how can I work smarter so that I have more time to rest? Like that's honestly
Yes.
where I'm at right now. And I know that a race like Boston, that was kind of my question to myself several years ago when I thought of why do I want to run that race? And if
Mm.
it's for the experience, doesn't really matter how I get there, right? It doesn't matter if I'm
Exactly.
qualified or if it's charity. And I think that's something that I like to talk to people about the Boston Marathon in particular because of that, because I want people to know that there are other ways to be a part of that experience that don't involve you qualifying and that you're still doing 26.2 miles. It's still a lot
Totally.
in the body. It's not like you're doing any less. And then again, to what
Mhm.
you've shared, people who are charity running, you are doing two marathons at once. That for
Totally.
me is just it. You are physically training to do the race, and then you're doing this whole other marathon of trying to raise, anywhere between $7,500 to $10,000 for that one
Crazy.
race day. So it is a lot. And I feel like again, people kind of miss that, but I want people to know that marathoning at these events, they are incredibly valuable for everyone who wants to do them, not just people who qualify. That's
No, and I think for people who don't know me, I actually grew up in the Boston area. So in Boston, all schools are shut down on Marathon Monday. So I grew up volunteering at this race. I remember being in second grade and handing out the drinks to runners as they go by, or to the
Mhm.
wheelchair racers as they go by. So for me, this was a deeply emotional experience of I'm the runner who actually gets the cup of water, who gets that Gatorade. And stopping for friends we see along the way. We were in a mode of just experiencing this and enjoying it and feeling the energy of the crowd. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. We knew we're not going to be winning any medals, so let's enjoy it.
I listened to another podcast yesterday, and the person's like, I know I'm not making a podium,
I
so I want to have fun. I want
I
to savor it. And I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you.
exactly. Am I
But
gonna
then
like I may poop my pants anyway. Am I gonna like push myself that much harder to poop my pants to be like 30 minutes faster? Or am I going to stop and see my friends along the way and give them a hug and say, thank you for coming? That sounds way more fun to me.
absolutely, especially when you're so rooted in community, right? Like when you're so
Yeah.
rooted in not only your own personal community, but in the community at large, right? For me, anytime I run these marathons, bigger marathons, there's always that moment of awe where I'm like, oh, I'm doing this with thousands of other people. Like we're all getting from start line to finish line. And I have no
Yeah.
clue what brought each of us here, but it's pretty amazing to think that when you're thinking of, say, Boston or Chicago or even New York City, right? Like when you're thinking about this event that somehow is bringing anywhere between 30 to 40,000 people together, like that's the universe working magic. And to me, there's always a moment in those races where I'm like, I'm here. Like I'm experiencing this.
Yeah. It's to your point, it's so awe-inspiring and incredibly humbling where my takeaway is, oh, I am always one piece of sand on this very large beach. And everyone here is from a very different background, has a very different story. One of my favorite parts is seeing people of all different ages, all different body types. And guess what? They all cross, they all finish.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna loop it back because that's my we're looping. Okay, so you have flame bearers. Now, how did you get into podcasting?
So this is actually a COVID adaptation. This was never the plan. I like to be very transparent about that. Again, to your point of showing people my underbelly, people um, sometimes see what I have done and they assume things about me. And I like to just be very clear. No, this was not the plan. This was me rolling with the punches, seeing an opportunity and jumping on it. So I was receiving a master's of public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School, and I had been pitching a role to the International Olympic Committee. I had been an international affairs major long before and a gender studies minor. So I've always been very passionate about working with women and girls. And I said, hey, you do a lot of awesome stuff around diversity, equity, inclusion, but the entire world has no clue what you're doing because it's buried in a really ugly report on your website. Essentially, you would have no idea that the IOC has prioritized gender, has prioritized inclusivity when it comes to getting more nations involved, unless you go to their website. And this is back in, I think, 2009, and read this report. And I said, well, my background is in marketing and media. Let me help tell the world all the awesome stuff you've already done. You've already invested in this. Now you just need to tell people in a language that they understand. And guess what? It's not going to be a all copy report on your website.
Mhm.
And there was some excitement and interest in this, but then the pandemic broke out and no one knew what was going to happen. And the Olympics and the Paralympics were postponed. So I said, okay, I'm just going to do this on my own. So I applied for funding within the Harvard ecosystem. I talked to anyone who had a podcast. I read every book on podcasting and I made the leap. I literally have pictures of me buying my first set of equipment and struggling to put it together, being like, "What is this? I have no idea." Sending it to my best friends, not sharing it wide because, I have a serious inferiority complex when I'm talking to these badass Olympians and Paralympians. I need to pretend that I'm really on my game. Um, but no, looking back, I you fake it till you make it, and that was how I did it. And 4 years later, we now do podcast, video, and live events. But it was really me wanting to give voice to a group that I thought needed to have their stories out there more, and I wanted to do it in the right way, or what I believe is the right way.
Yeah, I mean, that to me it's always baffling that the world is half female and we're mm, relegated to being second, I think, in that regard. And then even, I'm a mother, and oftentimes I'm like, I literally created new life. And yet and yet I'm doing groceries like nothing, or I'm putting gas in my car, and that's a lot of women, right? Like we're doing all this amazing stuff, and yet we are not elevated to the way that we should be, because men are at the top, and there's a lot of things systemically that need to change with that. But I'm going to go back and ask you, just for clarification purposes,
Yeah.
what's the difference between the Olympics and the Paralympics?
Great question. So, the Olympics are for able-bodied athletes. The Paralympics are for people with physical disabilities. So they are 2 weeks after the Olympics. Para literally means parallel to, but they have their own games that is completely separate from the Olympics. What's interesting, and I think deeply unfortunate about that, is they are significantly less covered. So the last Paralympics were the first ones, actually Tokyo were the first Paralympics ever to be shown on national primetime television. So we've talked about the lack of support for female athletes. If you are a para female athlete, let alone a para female athlete from the global south who is black or brown, who is gay, who is not the majority religion, good luck getting any coverage, let alone coverage that doesn't, co-opt your narrative or paint you with the pity brush. So we're making sure to half of our athletes that we elevate are para athletes. I think even frankly, this is me getting on my soapbox, the the prioritization of the Olympics being before the Paralympics is symbolic of a prioritization there that I would love to see go away. I know that there are significant logistical challenges of capacity having all athletes in one city, but I think the split between Olympians and Paralympians really discredits and in certain ways um, is a slap in the face to Paralympians because of the prioritization of Olympians. I understand that parallel to means that they should literally be valued equally, but that is not how it plays out societally. A lot of people don't even, to your point, have never even heard of the Paralympics.
Oh, I didn't. I
Yeah,
was not aware of it, and
yeah,
I will honestly admit that it
yeah,
was social media has helped me in that, in terms of some of
totally.
these athletes are like really fun to watch and really
They're
fun to
so
follow.
cool.
And like I see them and I'm like, how that I see them and I think, okay, so I'm not gonna complain about my run when,
Yep.
like I have all my body parts. There's like it just my life is different, so I'm not going to complain. But I have a kind of a follow-up question to that, and I'm not sure if you'll know it, but do they have the same cash prizes?
Um, it depends on the team.
Okay.
So, um, and the sport. But yes, in general, I believe the Paralympics in the I think so. I know in the
Like
US,
Team US, say.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Yes, but globally, no.
Okay. How do you find your guests for the podcast?
A couple different ways. Right now it's predominantly word of mouth, if I'm going to
Okay.
be honest. So our goal when we work with an athlete is to create their favorite piece on them ever done. And as a result, they're
Mm.
really excited about it and they want to share it with their friends and family. And nothing goes live without their consent and their, 10 out of 10 approval. And as a result, they're excited to connect me to their friends in the parasport space or the Olympic space because you say, I had a great experience working with this company. I want your story out there too. So right now it is word of mouth. In the beginning, honestly, it was a lot of hustle. It was a lot of me leaning on connections of people that I've been in touch with saying, here's why you should work with us and trying to convince them. Here's the
Mhm.
value we will provide to you. But I think we've turned a corner, which I feel very lucky about.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to turn that corner myself because so much hustle. I'm like, I tell myself all the time, what's the worst that I can get? A no. So
No,
send that email, reach out to people like, what's the worst someone's going to say? They're going to say no. And if it's email, then they don't respond, then I'll just assume it's a no. But I feel that. Okay. I have 7 final questions for you. I even
okay,
counted. I have 7 final questions. They're going to be a little bit rapid fire-ish.
let's do
Okay.
it.
So I want you to think specifically of women and females when I ask you these questions. All right. Why is it important to bet on yourself?
If you don't, no one else will.
Hmm. Why is it important to tell your story?
Every story matters.
Hmm. Why is it important to participate in sports?
It builds confidence and it is an opportunity to build your community.
Hmm. Why is it important to uplift other women?
We all rise together.
Listen. Okay. Yes, I agree with that because we need to change. That is one of the biggest stories that we need to change is
Yes.
that
If
we are competing against one another when we are not. There is no one like you, no one like me, no one with the life experience that I come to
Mhm.
the table. Like no one. We're so
No.
unique and we should all take up space.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you go down, I go down. If I go up, you go up. Same thing.
Honestly, honestly, y'all, seriously, we need to think bigger than us, and we need to think of the generations that come behind us. And as at least for me, the older I get, I'm like, oh, now I'm like, before I was just aiming to be the role model for my daughters. And now I'm
Mm,
like, oh, actually there's like other women alongside me that are looking to me when, there's a whole contingency of humans that will find me because I share my story, and it's important to do that. Okay. Where can we find you? What are the best ways to connect with you?
yes, flamebearers.com. So this is flame as in the thing in the Olympic torch and bearers as in the people who actually bear the flame. Flamebearers.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X, whatever you're calling it these days, TikTok, LinkedIn. You can also reach out to me directly, Jamie Mittelman. My email is jamie@flamebearers. If anything I've said today resonates with you and you want to find a way to work together, go to flamebearers.com. We have a collaborate button. We have a button that you can fill out, a form that you can fill out and say, hey, Jamie, I loved what you said. I don't know how I want to work with you, but I want to work with you in some way. Fill it out and I'll get back to you right away.
Yeah. What do you have coming up that we can celebrate you in?
Oh, okay. We have a very exciting upcoming video and podcast series spotlighting women who are competing in the Paris Olympics and Paralympics. So we have 20 athletes and it launches in April. We have not quite announced our co-host, but let me tell you, she is a 6-time national champion in her respective sport. She's a 2-time Olympian, a total boss, and I am so excited to be in conversation with her today. Excuse me, yes, I have an interview with her today, but in the future. So I would say stay tuned for those episodes and follow along. So when the Olympics and the Paralympics come, you know about the women we're watching.
Yeah. So that we're all doing what we can to elevate our sport by doing our homework beforehand. Like, truly can't say it enough. It is us who are already in the sport that do have the responsibility to uplift other women who are in the sport and to invite women who are out of the sport into the sport, whatever that sport may be. Okay. Final question is, what are your final words for us?
One of the reasons I do this work is because I think it's really important for everyone to be able to find their inner Olympian or their inner
Mm.
Paralympian. I was not an Olympic athlete. I played college sports for 2 years. I was, have been cut from teams, but I think everyone holds the ability and the traits of these best in class athletes in whatever sport they are. And I think that each of us has the opportunity to see ourselves in the women that we look up to. So my final word would just be to identify the person who you look up to most, and then two, see how you can amplify the parts of yourself within yourself that are most like her that you aspire to want to be like.
I love that. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. Everyone else, we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.